Hey everyone, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Okay, the microphone is on. This is the Catalyst Astrology report for the new moon in Taurus. That was on May 11th. 2021. Wow. There are lots of things happening in this lunar cycle that we are going to try to give a summation of in this video. I have done several takes now just to get to the point of this intro. So, and I don't have any editing software, so I got to do it in one take, guys, in order to get it up there on the interwebs. But I think we can do it because there's some very basic themes here. And of course, we're going to be together every day with the Daily Medicine if you choose to drop by, especially if you subscribe to this channel and you get notifications, then you'll know when I go live every day. But there are some basic themes here. And truly, there will be some spiritual inspiration that comes from this lunar cycle with the new moon in Taurus. But there are some very notable transits that are happening today, definitely today into tomorrow. Even just on the day of the new moon, it's very connected to Neptune in Pisces. We have Mars in a square to Chiron. We have Mars also at the same time in a sextile to Uranus. So there is a lot of really potent and very courageous energy that is going to be utilized harmoniously in one direction, definitely at cross purposes with another direction, probably when it comes to our vulnerability and our wounding. And ultimately, the spiritual inspiration that will come, it will be the overcoming of a crisis over this month, and Saturn going retrograde is going to provide the pressure, the contraction, and the pressure on that situation in general, right? The Aquarian aspect that we are all connected to each other. Speaking of being connected to each other, Jupiter moves into Pisces, right? Oh boy, this is going to be like a big sigh of relief in some ways. Jupiter is co-ruler of Pisces, and so is very comfortable in Pisces, able to expand and fill a limitless space, which will, it just reminds me, oh my God, the concept of man spreading it definitely just came to mind in some strange way, because Jupiter just is endlessly expanding into any space, and with Pisces it is the endless ocean. So there will be a lot more comfortability with taking up space and communing with each other on a very emotional level. Jupiter will eventually go retrograde in the next cycle. When we have the total solar eclipse, and it'll come back into Aquarius. And so there will still be this moment where Jupiter will have to kind of pinpoint itself, which has been a real challenge. In some ways, Jupiter in Aquarius is expanding on our the intellect and the futuristic and humanitarian aspects of Aquarius, giving us the the representation and the access to the big picture and big ideas in order to focus in on that, lightning bolt of awareness that Aquarius can often bring about as a result of being Aquarius. Just seeing past everything. But Jupiter in Pisces is going to be very, very lovely, very benefic, very supportive of everybody getting along. So that's going to be, I think, going to be a real nice complement to what otherwise is going to be a lot of restriction, a lot of pressure. Mercury in Gemini will go retrograde right after a full moon lunar eclipse in Gemini. The ambition that we are going to feel is really going to be strong, and we are not going to get a full view of how that relates to the process of social alchemy, how we all can work together. Oh man. Yeah, it's going to be very intense. And this, like I said, that spiritual inspiration, it's going to come from overcoming of a crisis and the trust and the complete tuning into the natural rhythm is going to be really important as we each set an intention and activate this new moon to bring forward that inspiration and worth, right? Taurus is the second house, and we are talking about value and worth. And we make a decision about what is valuable to us, what is worth it, and then we just kind of we, embed ourselves in it. And this new moon is giving each of us the intention to hold the space, to be inspired, to overcome a crisis, and to trust the process. So the Sabian symbol, let's look at the chart here so we can start going through it, because this is really some really major themes to talk about. So we don't really need to go into the day by day, the week by week necessarily, but it's important to see what is actually going on. So we have our new moon at 21 to 22 degrees of Taurus, as you'll see here, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That will be noon Pacific Standard Time. And this Sabian symbol, which is very much connected to the imagery for this video, is the white dove flying over troubled waters. And it, I just watched the movie, the Russell Crowe Noah, if you've ever seen it. I hadn't seen it before. And, I like epically beautiful and cinematic things, even if they delivered pretty well in terms of the production value, but I'm not a biblical scholar, so I have no idea really how true to. I'm sure they embellished quite a bit, and Noah, they really made him out to seem very crazy. And by, towards the end of the movie, he was making decisions based on what he thought was the will of God, and was really, his judgment was being clouded by his own paranoia and his own ego getting in the way, essentially, and then having him almost do some things that he would have really regretted as a result of thinking that he had to make certain sacrifices. So if you've ever seen that movie, you know what I'm talking about. And I don't mean to get biblical with this. It's just that the actual Sabian symbol is referencing the white dove. And what is the white dove is showing Noah and the inhabitants of the ark that there's hope, and that there is land and there is salvation close by. And it's reminds, Noah and met the crisis courageously and was in complete obedience to God. I mean, to a fault, really. That's what they really set up, is that, but when it came down to it, he couldn't actually do the thing that he thought that he needed to do. So, and it turns out that he was given the opportunity to make a choice, right? Rather than just blindly adhering to everything that God was telling him. So, and that's part of it too. But it's a message. It's a message from God. It was the white dove was a message from the Holy Spirit, and announcing that it was time now for the waters to recede, and a new version of humanity was able to come back into the scene. All right. And so it's a message, and it's very symbolic, and it can be applied to a personal situation as well. And this personal crisis resulting from emotional upheaval, right? Or for eruption of unconscious forces and impulses into the consciousness. So you can look at it a lot of different ways, but the whole essence of this lunar cycle with this new moon, if you want to reference that story as an archetypal, framework in order to understand this, is that we are still in the midst of trusting this process as it's unfolding in Taurus, especially with Uranus still here, and allowing that intention to grow within each of us, and knowing that the inspiration will come to us as a result of how we handle the crisis, right? There's that moment of choice when you feel like that you've been abandoned and you don't know what to do, and you followed the direction of, divine source and your higher self up to a point, and then you have to make some choices, knowing that there will be some measure of message, there will be some inspiration with what we collectively and individually are going to interface with during this month. It is no joke. Having the eclipses, Saturn in retrograde, Mercury in retrograde as well, and also Mars is going to cross Sirius, the star Sirius, and Neptune is very, very connected to this new moon. It's in a sextile to this new moon, Neptune in Pisces, and this is home territory. Neptune, anything that touches Neptune in Pisces is just going to be dissolved back into, the one source of all, right? And so we have to. There's been consistent opportunities to let ourselves go into that space as long as we can stay grounded and aware and intentional about what we are creating from that space as a conscious co-creator of this whole reality in this process. And it's been very difficult because it really does it's a solvent. Neptune just dissolves everything, right? And so you really have to a certain extent, surrender yourself, be a literal medium for this new reality to eventually present itself. Probably when Neptune comes into Aries, I'm sure we will see some manner of rebirth on a spiritual level and a spiritual possible revival at that point. We'll see. We shall see. But yeah, Neptune is in a sextile to this new moon, this investment, the harmonious 60-degree angle where they are supporting each other, but there's action that does need to be taken. And I think the action that will need to be taken in order to consciously give of ourselves, just like Noah did, is the sense of trusting and knowing what's valuable to us, what's valuable within us, and staying focused on that as we address the incoming, whatever it is, crisis, upheaval, disruption, change, whatever it is coming in. So that's the intention of this whole lunar cycle, as I said, with this new moon, and it's in sextile to Neptune. Okay, so this is going to keep coming back up as a theme because not only is the moon going to sextile Neptune and then the sun exactly sextile Neptune, that also means that all of the Gemini energy, which is just as important right now with Mercury and Venus and the North Node all in Gemini, is that they're all going to square Neptune later. And so we're going to feel cross purposes with the Gemini, especially in these Orion starseed positions where Mercury and Venus especially are going to be squaring Neptune. And so this is where we're going to have to really start learning how to wrap our minds around all of the potential ideas, all of the potential communication, all of the movement of data and resources, what we know, what we think we know, how we know it, all of this. Gemini too is really about our technical skills and ambition to sharpen them and make them better. Competition is part of the Gemini archetype because you kind of need to, multiple sides, at least two sides to have a competition. And so the Orion starseed factor, especially later in the month when Venus and Mercury come together, right? And Mercury then goes retro, so they cross each other, and then because Mercury is going to go retrograde back in Gemini right after a lunar eclipse with a sun in Gemini. So we're going to then get tested on everything in terms of trusting the natural unfoldment, trusting what we invested ourselves into in the first place, and then allowing it to grow naturally, which is a very Taurus thing. And then when we come into Gemini, when the consciousness is already, developed and come out, and we are engaging with the reality as a consciousness and manifesting ideas, having ideas that want to be manifested, communicating all of the Gemini aspects, spanning the spectrum of potential ideas here. That's all going to square. It's all going to square Neptune. And so again, same thing. Neptune is just the ocean. So even at cross purposes, anything that touches Neptune is just going to dissolve into it. And when we're talking about mutability, right? So things will shift very easily in our minds. And it's not a terrible thing to allow that to happen to a certain extent without getting emotionally involved necessarily. That's the trick. And the real the real wisdom from the Orion star seeds is being able to engage that space without it being a personal endeavor, because it's one in this, one in the same, basically, the twins. So we'll deal with that later, those mutable squares to Neptune, and it will reflect back on how the new moon was in a sextile to Neptune. So one other thing that I want to mention about two things. All right, so we're still looking at the new moon, right? This day in itself is really plenty to talk about. We have Mars in Cancer in a square to Chiron, and again in a sextile, 60-degree angle or square. So at the same time, right, because Chiron and Uranus have been in the semi-sextile for a while now. They've been kind of traveling together in this very subtle 30-degree angle that they can be supporting each other, but it's subtle. It's often missed, this connection, because they're only one sign apart. So Mars is going to be in a square, right, to Chiron in Aries, and then is going to sextile Uranus in Taurus. And, this is about the latent worth, right? Because our worth, our self-esteem, our character really develops in the fourth house and with the Cancerian archetype because of the protection of the familial bonds, right? The protection of these intimate bonds of family and your spiritual community, or, the whatever group you emotionally find yourself loyal to and connected to and emotionally protected by, right? This is the Cancerian aspect. And Mars here has really been a protector and also receiving quite a bit of protection himself and support and nourishment. And Mars is learning a lot about himself with the protection of this very nurturing womb-like Cancer energy at the same time. And it's, Mars is in his fall position. He's there's not a lot of power here. Much more, and it's exaltation in Capricorn, because that's much more about getting things done. And the Cancer energy is more about forming the bonds and strengthening the bonds. So, but Mars could stand to really put some of that energy and also to take some respite, in terms of like this really intense warrior action as well, and do some healing as well. So, but in a square to Chiron, of course, we are, it's about the latent worth, like I said, the latent worth in an experience once we see it in a deeper meaning. So in a square to, at first some things are going to seem very simple. And very much the same thing as they've always seemed. And then you start to see it in a deeper way, right? Your intuition deepens, your sense of self starts to deepen, and then you start to see deeper meaning in things. And all of a sudden there is a latent worth that is revealed that you didn't see before. And this is, it's already, just take Mars and Chiron out of the picture and we just talk about Cancer and Aries in a square to each other, because Aries is very much about the subjective experience of action. So, something that we didn't see before within ourselves, in terms of cosmic order, a polarization once we discover there is a cosmic order to something, and then realizing that may be different than what our sense of law and order, from like a human standpoint. It's when these aspects are in square to each other, it's still about like a worth that we didn't see before that's brought out by seeing something deeper. But one is in the group, the family, the familial matrix of Cancer, right? The womb or the vessel that holds our vulnerability. And then Aries, which is, as actually the realm of Mars, of course. And so is the action, cardinal fire, the action and the potential and the desire and ambition behind it, of the self, trying to find a sense of just being, something to rally around, I guess, or to be centralized. So when these two aspects of Mars as well coming into a square with Chiron, I mean, it's really going to challenge our, again, worth, self-worth, revelation of worth, certification of worth is a big part of this whole lunar cycle. And Mars is seeing the value in the family, seeing the value in these bonds, seeing the value and the worth in something that is seemingly just happening all the time. And then Mars is becoming aware of how valuable these relationships and how valuable the family and this sense of containment and protection really is. And it's gonna challenge where, of course, Chiron, which is just, stimulating our vulnerability, of course, around, who we are as people, right? And Mars would much rather be in Aries thinking about himself and being a warrior and acting on it. And this, there's nothing wrong with that, but this is also now showing that there is so much value in the family and the nurturing aspect, the feminine aspect that Cancer represents. And I think it's just going to trigger us because we are still struggling with who we are each individually with Chiron and Aries. And then from there, though, Mars is going to sextile. Mars will at the same time be in that sextile to Uranus, which has really been very interesting shift from the 10 to 11 degree or the 11 to 12 degree symbol has been, I felt it's very palpable very palpable. You've gone from what we have been cultivating within our collective consciousness. And now it's like we're all looking out and and starting to want what we could have in terms of an objective reality, right? We're starting to take that our collective third eye and use it and start to actually visualize and to see and to desire this objective reality that is way more humanitarian, way more about it's not collectivism, it's really just that that everybody has an equal opportunity, right? We want to have the healthiest collective that we can, because that's when we all maximize our potential as a species and can really evolve, right? Isn't that the whole point, is evolution? So again, Mars, it's really about discovering and getting a deeper sense of the worth of these familial bonds, of the matrix, the familial matrix, the family, the mothering aspect, the protection aspect, and the healing aspect, as well. And this is all still on tomorrow on the 11th of the new moon. So just be prepared for just a lot of awareness, strong, palpable, powerful awareness, and maybe some things triggering our vulnerable spots, and realizing that there's also a part of us that is quiet and creating a space in order to substantiate what our ideal is, and create a space that allows in that inspiration when it's time. I think that's what's important to realize, is that we do have more patience to practice right now, because it's not gonna, there's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of challenges coming throughout this eclipse cycle. So I want to just go through some really basic things. Oh yeah, and speaking of which, so Black Moon Lilith, I want to show you this. Black Moon Lilith right here is actually in conjunction with the new moon. So let's just consider that for 1 second too, is that, again, the spiritual inspiration that comes to the individual in the overcoming of a crisis. This is the intention we're setting to create within ourselves over this next lunar cycle, how we are going to evolve and grow as individuals, in this larger context. And then to have Black Moon Lilith involved directly in with this new moon is that we have an incredible amount of power. Asteroid Ceres is also now in Taurus, the goddess of the grain and our agriculture. She is the one that actually provides the sustenance for us to grow, and represents the cycles of growth and decay, right, that are also necessary as part of a healthy growing cycle. She's also in Taurus now. So there is still so much of this Taurus energy, and Black Moon Lilith, right? This is our power of our dark feminine, of preservation, of instinct, of survival, of direct connection to the planet herself. Also, along with this, so we could there's so much power we can draw from our very connection to this planet if we allow ourselves to do that and really trust and hone in on those signals that are coming. And, you know, the Schumann has been blasting. It's finally calm after, you know, like a week of just escalating peaks that just kept getting higher frequency, higher frequency, higher frequency. It was incredibly intense. And now it's finally settling for the moment. So we've kind of had no choice but to ride along with that wave and see where it brought us. And it likely brought a lot of people to exactly where they need to focus and pinpoint it. And this Black Moon Lilith with the new moon, I think, is really going to give us a chance to, and will probably trigger us even more in places we didn't realize we were even being triggered. So it's also being aware of that as well. So that's the new moon, the 11th of May 2021. So let's look at a couple things as we go along, because the things that are going to be important, like I said, Jupiter is going to come into Pisces, and that's going to happen. Let's see here. That's going to happen on the 13th. So right away, so the new moon on the 11th, the 12th, Mercury is going to trine Saturn. Okay. Now Saturn has not gone retrograde quite yet. So this point of trine is going to come back around a couple times, because the moon and Venus are all going to trine Saturn at this degree of Aquarius, of going through the tunnel, of bypassing what would normally be natural evolution, because humanity has the mental capacity to do so, and the ability to use that mental capacity to actually evolve by intentionally doing it. Saturn is going to go retrograde at this degree. This is where the squeeze is going to happen. You know, that train going through the tunnel, that tunnel is going to start getting narrower and narrower, and we may have to turn back and go back out and reconfigure how we're going to do this, because the pressure will be on with Saturn going retrograde. So this degree, this trine right here, is going to give us the key, right? It's going to give us the key before it goes retrograde, which is what? It's about telepathy. Straight up, Mercury at 14 degrees Gemini is bridging physical space and social distinctions. Two men are communicating telepathically. That is really, keep that in your head, because that is exactly how we're going to manage a lot of as the physical space starts to constrict, and it seems like we are not even able to do it. This is where we're going to have to learn how to bridge physical space and social space and communicate with each other. Okay, this is important as we move forward. So that trine, that position, there's going to be, like I said, Venus is going to trine it, but Saturn will be retrograde at that point. The moon's going to trine it. So this is important, this telepathy that Mercury, the Gemini, this degree of Gemini represents, is something we need to pay attention to as we go through this time. So Mercury is in that trine, and then the sun is going to sextile Neptune. Exactly. We've already talked about that. And that's really about the certification of our worth, right? And getting some measure of recognition of something that has been developing naturally, and a social recognition in some ways, right? It's like a jewelry shop. Of course, the minerals and the crystals have gotten to the point where they're valuable on their own. And then there is a certification, because we then want to utilize that as a resource, and we give it value. So that again is with this sextile to Neptune, about giving of ourselves completely to this. There will be some measure of how we can express ourselves through something that is certified as worthy, and then we can give of ourselves to substantiate some sort of conscious ideal through that. At the same time, the moon is going to meet the North Node. And we can go back a couple hours to show you that. The moon's going to meet the North Node. And that's where, again, the new lands open. And we are going to, Mercury may have helped us wrap our heads around that today as we're wrapping up the lunar cycle. But the moon meeting the North Node is going to make it very personal and very, very palpable in an emotional way, something that we intuitively are able to pick up. What is the joy of new beginnings, right? The newly opened lands. So we're going to feel that within us as well. When the moon hits the North Node, we're going to feel pulled towards it. If it's going to be important that we allow ourselves to tap into our antenna, because it will pull us in the right direction if we are sensitive to it. Those newly open lands. And at the same time, yes, this is also when Jupiter goes into Pisces. And that's, like I said, that's going to be like this big sigh, right? This big, like, relax, it's like getting into the hot tub or something. And it's just like, everything just lets go. And I feel every time I think about Jupiter going to Pisces, it's just like, All right. So, and that's the 13th. So Mars on the 15th will be conjunct Sirius, so that's with a moon in Cancer. Ooh boy. Let's see here. That's and the moon will be pretty close as Mars is in a quincunx to Saturn. So in conjunction to Sirius, right? This is the absolute depth of our inner knowing, is this midpoint of Cancer. It's literally the nadir of the chart of 14 to 15 degrees Cancer. Or no, that's 0 degrees Cancer. This is literally the midpoint of the sign is 14 to 15 degrees Cancer, and it's the ultimate permanent knowledge, I guess you could say. But in a quincunx to Saturn, still not retrograde yet. And this, we're going to really need to adjust ourselves in terms of how we think we're getting somewhere, how we're going to evolve, because with the moon and Mars pretty much on Sirius, the Sirian star seeds are going to light right up. And in some ways, it may be able to show us how to where we can adjust ourselves, because when Saturn does go retrograde, right, that's, like I said, the constriction's going to start when it comes to our ability to evolve faster than we normally would, because we are human beings and we can actually consciously activate that process. So this whole area here with Mars and the moon at Sirius, I think this quincunx actually is going to be really is going to give us a lot of information, and it might be really jarring, but it will actually show us exactly what we need to see. So that's the 15th. And then right after that, the sun is going to trine Pluto at the end at Algol, at Algol, just like Venus and Mercury had all done. And we're going to see a big release. And at the same time, Venus conjunct the North Node at the same time. So again, then it's going to be very palpable in our relationships, in the material world, what we value, who we value in terms of the newly open lands. We are going to actually have some measurability and tangibility in terms of where we are being pulled towards when Venus meets the North Node. And at the same time, the sun in that trine to Pluto at fixed star Algol, the head of Medusa, right? We're going to be releasing something substantial, and it's going to be a very big part of the transformation process that Pluto represents. And it's not going to take much. It's just going to be they're going to really get a lot of traction with each other. And then Venus will be activated by the North Node. We're going to see some shift in direction around this time, the 17th. And we're still looking at the first week. We haven't even hit the first quarter square yet. So, and then Venus is going to trine Saturn. The sun is going to come into Gemini at that point. And as we move through this second week, Jupiter will be in Pisces. Mercury is going to square Neptune, and that's going to be, I think that's going to be also fairly substantial in terms of, we may think we know some things about some things, okay? And we're also going to have a moon opposition to Neptune as well. And so we're also going to feel like we have some things to anchor ourselves to. And but that means that that's a T-square, right? That T-square is going to be where Mercury is the midpoint, the fulcrum in some ways of this opposition with the moon. And Neptune, we do know some things. That's the thing. We know some things. And we know how do I put this? It's about creative integration. There we go, right? Because on the one hand, we're being like challenged to completely diffuse ourselves and give of ourselves to this, as a medium to this materializing situation. With the moon in an opposition, it's going to be in Virgo. It's going to, we're going to want to really get ourselves organized, and we want to be in total kind of in control of our emotions and where we're going to put everything, and we're kind of in charge. And then Mercury is going to be, it's the creative integration, right? It's literally going to be like, how do we use the mental processes to find this balance point? So this is also going to be the 21st, I feel like, is going to be a significant moment, and then coming into, and the sun will square Jupiter at the same time, because the sun will be in Gemini. There's all this mutable energy and squaring energy. The sun will be 0 degrees Gemini, Jupiter. And then, what we think and what we know and the knowledge we're working with and the discovery and exploration that Gemini represents, especially now that we're getting into Orion starseed territory, is going to be strong. But we're also going to feel a lot of cross purposes with energy that has more to do with, the spiritual bonds and the transcendent experience and the expansion into all potential that affects not just us, but everything. That's going to be... And because we're climbing up on eclipse season at this point, and Saturn retrograde as well. So this time frame here, this weekend of the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, is going to be when another big shift happens, and we are going to start being challenged in some ways, like I said, with what we know and what we think we know, and the experiences that the very strong experiences that we're having in the transcendent and world of imagination, and the collective experience and the collective karma. I mean, that is what Pisces represents. And then Saturn stations retrograde on the 23rd, and then we have our eclipse on the 26th. So here's this, and then the eclipse comes to the 26th. And like I said, this is 5 to 6 degrees of Gemini, 5 to 6 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's a full lunar eclipse. So the shadow of the planet Earth will be completely cast upon the moon, and the ambition that goes along with the beginning of Gemini when it comes to getting better at something, which is what, Gemini is about: learning and technical skills and knowledge and practice and repetition, right? All of those things are part of the sensory workings of your nervous system, right? This is how you gain muscle memory, is because you do it over and over and over. This is part of the Gemini archetype too. So there's a lot of ambition and wanting to get at the depth of something in the beginning of Gemini. And it can be, the flip side of it is using that as in a group solidarity function, which is this eclipse is right on this degree here is my natal sun. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to say the least. The ambition here is going to be, and the way we can use it alchemically is going to be overshadowed, is going to be blocked by us, our own selves. And so this is something this is something to be very, very aware of, as this eclipse is going to be, it's going to be intense. Okay, so, the last 2 weeks of, there's, again, Venus is going to square Neptune, the more of these squares, these mutable squares. Mercury and Venus are going to come together in Gemini before, right here at 25 degrees Gemini, before Mercury stations retrograde. Right at that time. And so I think that they're going to come together and give each other a sense of what is actually the most important, right? Like kind of pruning all of the ideas down to something very manageable and something that we can easily, give our resources to so that it'll grow. And then they're going to go ships passing in the night, right? Mercury's going to go retrograde. And at this point, this is going to be when it's going to feel like we're not getting the communication, the insight, the information that we think we need. This is going to be an interesting Mercury retrograde. I feel like that we're going to really struggle with feeling like we're not getting the information that we need. And this is going to be when we have to really start going more deeply into ourselves and to allow for the space for the insight to come in, because we're still in this lunar cycle. We just passed the full moon, as what we're talking about here. So as we go through the rest of this, we have a solar eclipse that happens then on the 10th of June, okay? And this is the next new moon. So that would also, which is what here? I have it written down. 20 degrees Gemini. So this is there's going to be so many, the multitude of options are going to be made available to us. But with it, the eclipse itself is going to go over the North Pole. So it's going to start, the path of totality is going to start in Canada, and it's going to wrap over the North Pole and then finish out in Russia. And it's really representing the full multitude of options in terms of ideas and thought forms, and anything that you can imagine will be all there for us to engage with. But since we're talking about it's an annular solar eclipse, right? So it's just the ring of fire around it. We will definitely feel in that moment all of the multitude of ideas and potential, right, of ideas, but it's going to block us from really being able to access and express ourselves through this multitude of potential ideas. It's like going to a buffet or a cafeteria, right? You can just put whatever you want on your tray, and this is from a mental perspective what the next solar eclipse is going to represent. And so I think we're gonna have access to so much at this point, and then we're gonna come into the solstice not long after. And Venus at that point will already be in Cancer, so it's really gonna be so much mother energy and protection and holding and receiving, and the value, even the value of the relationships even more is gonna be we're gonna be very sensitive to it. This is, and the mother archetype is going to get very strong at this point, as Mars then goes into Leo at that point and becomes way more himself at that point, and steps into a position of authority, and central authority. So, and I feel like things will shape up quite a bit as we go through all of this. And the real takeaway here for this new moon, I saw on somebody's website, it says this new moon, dreams come true. And I really feel like that is very accurate, but it is not going to come without some serious testing of us and our ability to overcome the crisis. If we want the spiritual inspiration, we have to overcome the crisis, which means that we are going to have to really stand in our own knowing and our faith and our trust in what we're doing, and stay very focused. Just like today's daily medicine, we have to stay on track in terms of our attention and our awareness, and not get pulled into the feelings and the drama necessarily that goes along with the process of really facing some really, like I said, the pressure. The pressure with Saturn retrograde is going to be substantial. And Mercury retrograde is also going to really challenge us to go within to get our answers, instead of relying on necessarily. I mean, this is that moment where we're going to feel like we're being abandoned by our own guidance system, or our God, or our high, you know what I mean? Like, we're not going to, I feel like this retrograde is going to test us in that way, in terms of, and when it squares Neptune as well, like I said, that T-square with the moon is it's going to be, we're going to have to learn to make some space to creatively face our challenges, and accept that, you know, there's new things coming in, and these processes, you know, these are fixed points in time. You know, we can't stop Saturn retrograde. We can't stop the Mercury retrograde. All we can do is resonate with what it has to offer us in terms of an archetypal experience, and, you know, ride the wave of why we came here in the first place, which is why it's so important to know your own chart, because then you can see how you are meant to ride this multifaceted wave as it unfolds. So, guys, I know that's a lot of information. I felt like I jumped around a lot, but I also, you know, it's really going to be about the spiritual, like I said, the spiritual inspiration that comes from overcoming a crisis. And when that happens, it does feel like dreams come true. And it does feel like that we're getting our wishes fulfilled in a lot of ways. But it's also going to be very challenged through the retrogrades, I think. And then to have Neptune really involved in the process could go either way for us. It really depends if we're staying on track in our awareness and what we're here to do. So you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you for stopping by. If you're new here, thank you for coming back. If you're a subscriber, if you're interested in a reading or energy work, you can go to the description box below and get all of the details that you need in order to make that happen, and reach out if you need support. You can find Catalyst Energies on Facebook and Telegram, and it's really just a way to post the content that I'm making here for the most part. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow for the daily medicine transmission. In the meantime, have a great new moon, set some intentions for, you know, to get that message of hope and peace, because it's absolutely there. It just, you know, may not be on the timeline that we think it should be. And this is why the Taurus time is about trusting the natural cycles, and trusting the medium in which we are embedded in order to grow. You can't force the seed to grow. You have to trust that it does it on its own divine timing. And that seems to be a big part of what we're being asked to trust during this next new moon cycle. So take care, guys, and I will see you later. Bye.